Welcome to Idea Talks, a Unite podcast where we explore all things inclusion, diversity, equity, and accessibility, and how we can make our universities better for everyone.
I'm excited to be here.
Today, we're going to dive deep into making sure that European student mobility programs, like Erasmus plus us, are inclusive for all Unite students.
A very important topic.
You brought the IDEM Toolkit with you.
I did.
This toolkit comes from the IDEM project.
Yes.
And IDEM stands for Inclusion, Diversity, Equity, and Mobility.
That's right.
So let's take a look at the key ideas and tools from the IDEM project and how they can be applied to the Unites. Alliance. So all our students have equal access to enriching mobility experiences.
That's a good plan.
So IDEM wanted to ensure equal opportunities in mobility, but recognizes that equal doesn't always mean the same.
Right. And the name IDEM actually means the same in Latin.
Interesting.
So it really emphasizes that concept of equity.
Okay, so fairness and justice and opportunity.
Yes, exactly.
And it sounds like the IDEM project was student-driven.
It was. They really put student voices at the center of their work.
Which makes sense, right?
Of course.
Yeah.
And that's what led to the creation of the toolkit.
The IDEM toolkit.
Yes.
Okay, so who is this toolkit for? Is it just for administrators?
Well, administrators who want to foster inclusive mobility will definitely get a lot out of it, but it's also relevant for students,
Okay.
as well as policymakers, project leaders, and even academic staff.
So basically, anyone involved in or affected by diversity and inclusion efforts.
Exactly. And since the toolkit has a modular design, each university within Unite can adapt the components to fit their own context.
So it's not one size fits all.
Right. Each Unite
Yeah.
partner can really personalize their approach.
That's great. So there are 4 key elements to the toolkit.
There are.
Today, we'll look at how each relates to Unite.
Sounds good.
So let's start with the first element, which is new concepts for inclusive mobility.
Okay.
This focuses on understanding key terms that help us address barriers to equitable participation.
Right.
One of these is self-exclusion.
Yes. So what exactly does that mean when we talk about student mobility?
It's when students decide not to pursue mobility opportunities because they think those opportunities aren't for them.
I see.
Maybe they're afraid of discrimination, or they're worried about the financial burden,
Okay.
or maybe they just don't see anyone like them who has participated in mobility programs.
Yeah.
So they think it's not for me.
So it's not necessarily about the application process or language requirements, but more about these internal psychological barriers.
Yeah, exactly. And IDEM showed us we need to change how we view this.
Okay.
Self-exclusion isn't just a personal choice.
Okay.
It reflects how institutions communicate and the types of support systems they have in place.
So it's partly our responsibility within the Unite Alliance.
It is.
So how can we address this self-exclusion?
Well, we need to move beyond just offering support.
Okay.
We need to be proactive.
So what could that look like?
We need to do more targeted outreach.
Okay.
We need to diversify how we communicate about mobility to make sure we're reaching all students.
Exactly. We also need to collaborate with student networks.
Especially those representing underserved groups.
Right. And we need to make sure our promotional materials are diverse,
I see.
so students can actually see themselves in those materials.
Yeah.
And we need to include students in the design of mobility programs.
Okay. So that they feel ownership.
Yeah.
Okay, let's move on to the next concept.
Sure.
Psychological safety.
Right.
What does that mean in a mobility context?
So psychological safety is all about creating environments where students feel secure and valued.
Yeah.
They need to feel that they can fully participate without being judged.
So basically, they need to feel comfortable asking for help and expressing their opinions
Exactly.
without fear of negative consequences.
Yeah. And when students feel safe, their learning improves.
I see.
But when they don't feel safe, it can trigger stress.
And self-doubt.
Right. Which can hinder their experience.
So how can Unite cultivate this feeling of psychological safety for our students?
Well, the toolkit suggests training for staff and peer mentors on how to be advocates for psychological safety.
Okay.
Also, we could offer workshops that promote inclusive environments,
Okay.
and we can provide personalized support mechanisms for students
Okay.
and make sure that our communication is sensitive to the diverse needs of our students.
So it's about creating a culture of respect and understanding.
Yeah.
Okay, so the last concept in this element is the shift from using the term underrepresented to underserved students.
Yes.
Why is this change important for Unite?
Because the language we use shapes how we perceive things and how students feel.
I see.
Calling someone underrepresented can imply that they're not interested in participating.
Okay.
But underserved puts the focus on us, on the institutions.
Okay.
It means that we haven't done enough to meet the needs of these students,
Oh.
whether those needs are financial, cultural, or logistical.
So it's not about blaming students for not participating. Right.
It's about acknowledging that we need to do more to support them,
Exactly. And that aligns perfectly with IDEM's goal.
of creating truly accessible, inclusive, and equitable programs.
Exactly.
Okay, that's a really helpful distinction. Let's move on to the second element.
Okay.
IDEM Squad and IDEM Clubs.
Right.
These are initiatives aimed at removing barriers and fostering supportive environments,
Exactly.
especially within European university alliances like Unite.
That's right.
So I think it makes a lot of sense for European university alliances like Unite to lead the way in fostering inclusion. We already have these established structures for collaboration.
And we're committed to cross-border mobility.
Exactly. But the toolkit does emphasize that we need clear communication strategies
We do.
to ensure that information is shared effectively
Right.
and that students can give feedback,
Yes.
which is where the IDEM Squad and IDEM Clubs come in.
Yes.
So let's start with the IDEM Squad. What exactly is it?
Well, it's a peer support network.
Made up of student ambassadors
Okay.
who volunteer to provide guidance and mentorship to other students who are interested in mobility.
So it's about students helping other students.
Exactly. And the idea was actually inspired by something that's already happening within Unite.
Oh, really?
Yes.
At which university?
At Alto University.
Okay.
They have something called the Alto Squad, which has been really successful.
So this peer-to-peer support is crucial, especially for students who might feel overwhelmed by the idea of studying abroad.
Absolutely.
Huh.
And because the alliances are smaller and more interconnected, they are ideal for this kind of support.
I see what you mean. So how would a student who's interested in mobility connect with the IDEM Squad?
So local students at each Unite Cardi university would register to be contacted by students from other institutions.
Okay.
So these ambassadors can offer advice on all sorts of things,
Okay.
like navigating the application process at their home university or finding resources at their potential host university.
So they could even provide insights into the city where the university is located.
They could.
That's a great way to build trust and provide support even before a student decides to participate.
It is.
So what would be some key features for implementing the IDEM Squad in Unite?
Well, first, we need a user-friendly platform where students can connect with the ambassadors. A website, maybe.
Okay.
It needs to be accessible to everyone, regardless of their abilities or language proficiency.
So it's important that it's available in multiple languages.
Yes.
Okay, so what else?
Well, the ambassadors themselves are obviously crucial.
Yeah, of course.
We need a diverse group of volunteers who can share their knowledge and experiences.
Okay.
Some might have been on mobility themselves, while others might be local students with expertise on their university and city.
So students can get really personalized advice.
Exactly. And the platform can also host information and resources for all stages of the mobility journey.
Okay.
Things like FAQs and guides on visas, housing, and social integration.
Wow, so a really comprehensive support system?
Yes.
But how do we keep students engaged with the platform?
We can use social media to promote it and encourage students to share their experiences.
Okay.
We can also track engagement metrics to see what's working and what's not.
Makes sense. So how would Unite make all of this happen?
It would require collaboration across IT departments, international offices, and student associations.
Okay.
We would need a team to manage the platform,
Okay.
and we need to promote it through Unite channels
Okay.
and track metrics to measure the impact.
I see. Sounds like a great initiative. So what about the IDEM clubs?
IDEM clubs were actually proposed by students at an IDEM boot camp in Barcelona.
Oh, wow. So this came directly from the students themselves.
It did.
That's fantastic.
They're inclusive spaces on campus where students can connect with each other and share their experiences,
Okay.
more than just raising awareness.
Okay.
They're platforms for empowerment, dialogue, and collaboration.
So these clubs can help to address systemic barriers.
They can, by providing peer-to-peer education, support, and resources.
Okay, so where do these IDEM clubs fit into Unite?
The vision is to have these clubs at each Unite, partner university. So there's some consistency for students moving between campuses,
Okay.
and each club would have its own space and budget.
That makes sense. So what kinds of activities would these IDEM clubs host?
A variety of things, really. They could be social hubs for connecting with other students.
Okay.
They could be platforms for raising awareness about the barriers faced by underserved students.
Okay.
They could also host workshops for university staff,
Okay.
where students can hear their experiences and propose ideas for greater inclusion.
I can see how these clubs could be really impactful.
They can.
Why are alliances like Unite well-suited to support these IDEM clubs?
Because we have shared goals and a commitment to collaboration.
Okay.
And because we can pool resources and expertise.
Okay.
The clubs provide consistent and familiar environments for transitioning students. And we can leverage those existing structures to support these clubs.
Okay, so how would Unite support the creation of these IDEM clubs?
We could provide financial support and help with organization.
Okay.
We could promote them through Unite channels.
Okay.
And we can encourage collaboration between administrative staff and student leaders.
Okay.
So the clubs are student-driven but still have the support of the university.
Yeah, that's a good balance.
Exactly.
So what kind of impact could these IDEM clubs have on Unite?
They could enhance the individual experiences of students from underserved backgrounds.
Okay.
And strengthen the Alliance's commitment to equity and inclusion.
That's great.
And they could help reduce barriers to participation and create a stronger sense of belonging.
Amazing.
Yeah, they have the potential to be a really positive change for Unite.
Okay, let's move on to the third element, outreach and engaging students.
Okay.
So this is about fostering connections, belonging, and active participation.
Right.
And building trust. So it's about making all students feel included in the mobility opportunities that Unite offers.
It is.
And engaging their allies, too.
Exactly.
So we're not just providing information, we're really engaging with students on a personal level.
Yeah.
So what kinds of strategies can Unite use for inclusive engagement?
Well, we can host targeted information sessions
Okay.
that address specific barriers like finances or language difficulties.
Yeah.
We can also do personalized outreach to specific demographics within Unite,
Okay.
tailoring our message to their specific needs and interests.
What kind of tools could we use for this inclusive engagement?
Virtual information sessions are a good option.
Okay.
They're accessible to everyone, and we can tailor them to different groups of students.
Okay.
We can also create multilingual materials
Okay.
and use targeted email campaigns
Okay.
to reach specific groups of students with relevant information.
Sounds good. How can we make sure these outreach efforts are actually working?
By tracking attendance and engagement and gathering feedback from students.
So we can see who we're reaching and who we're not.
Yes.
And identify any unmet needs.
Exactly.
So how can the Unite Alliance build trust with its students?
Communication is key.
Okay.
Being transparent about the resources and support systems that are available.
Yeah.
We can create student staff support systems.
Like advisors, mentors, or peers who have experience with mobility.
Exactly.
We can also implement regular check-ins with students to make sure they're doing okay and address any concerns they may have. Yeah.
And we need to establish anonymous feedback channels
Okay.
so students feel comfortable sharing their honest opinions.
That makes sense. So what are some tools we can use for building relationships and cultivating trust?
We could set up buddy programs,
Okay.
maybe using a digital platform or app.
Okay.
We could also use interactive chatbots on our websites to provide instant support.
Okay.
And we can designate specific staff members as points of contact for individual students.
So they have someone they can go to with any questions or concerns.
Right.
Okay.
And we can use anonymous feedback forms and student surveys to gather feedback and make improvements.
Okay.
It's important to actually act on that feedback.
Yeah, to show students that we're listening and we value their input.
Exactly.
Now, the IDEM Toolkit also talks about the power of storytelling.
It does.
So how can Unite use storytelling to promote inclusive mobility?
We can share real student stories, particularly from students from underserved backgrounds.
Okay.
This can be very inspiring and motivating for other students who might not see themselves participating in mobility.
I see.
We should showcase diverse perspectives and experiences.
To show students that mobility can be for everyone.
Exactly.
What tools can Unite use to share these stories?
We can create digital storyboards on our websites.
Okay.
And we can share video testimonials.
Okay.
We should also use social media to share these stories
Okay.
and keep the content fresh by rotating the stories regularly.
Makes sense. Okay, let's move on to the fourth and final element.
Okay.
The role of inclusion officers within Unite.
Right.
So these individuals are dedicated contact points for underserved students.
Exactly.
Why is there a need for inclusion officers specifically within European university alliances?
Because even though there's been progress, European universities often lack adequate support services for underserved students,
Okay,
especially for those who are participating in international mobility programs.
I see.
So these inclusion officers would help students navigate those challenges
Okay.
and make sure they feel supported throughout their mobility journey.
So they act as advocates for students.
They do. They identify barriers and champion initiatives to address those barriers.
So they're really agents of change.
They are. They make sure the needs of these students are met.
Okay.
So they might advocate for more inclusive policies
Okay.
or for improvements to campus infrastructure.
Okay.
And they use data from their interactions with students to shape these policies.
Makes sense. So how would inclusion officers help to create consistency across the alliance?
They would collaborate to ensure that students have access to similar accommodations and support systems at each Unite partner university.
So if a student has a specific need at their home university, they can expect to have that need met at their host university as well.
Exactly.
Okay.
And they can share best practices to streamline processes across the alliance.
That's great. So what would be the broader impact of having inclusion officers in Unite?
Well, they could help reduce barriers to participation in mobility programs
Okay.
and decrease self-exclusion.
Okay.
And they would demonstrate Unite commitment to diversity and inclusion
Okay.
and help create a more welcoming and equitable environment for all students.
What are the core responsibilities of an inclusion officer?
They provide direct support to students.
Okay.
They coordinate and amplify student needs and concerns.
Okay.
And they collaborate with colleagues across the alliance
Okay.
to build joint structures and streamline processes.
So they're really working on multiple levels to support students.
They are.
How does the role of the inclusion officer connect with the other IDEM initiatives, like the IDEM Squad and the IDEM clubs?
They can work together to create a more holistic support system for students.
Yeah, okay.
The inclusion officer can refer students to the IDEM Squad for peer support
Okay.
and collaborate with the IDEM clubs to organize events and advocate for change.
I see.
And they can use their institutional knowledge to contribute to knowledge creation through things like boot camps.
Okay.
So they're really integral to making all of these initiatives work together.
It sounds like the IDEM Toolkit provides a lot of valuable insights for Unite.
It does.
One of the key takeaways is the importance of understanding and addressing self-exclusion
Right.
and fostering psychological safety for all students.
Yes.
And adopting that underserved perspective.
Right.
And using peer support through the IDEM Squad and IDEM clubs.
Exactly.
And establishing inclusion officers at each Unite partner university can really make a difference.
They can be instrumental in creating systemic change.
So what's one thing our listeners can think about after this episode?
Ask yourself, how can the concepts of self-exclusion and psychological safety be used at your university
Okay.
to design and deliver better mobility opportunities for all students?
Yeah,
That's something to really think about.
absolutely. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into inclusive mobility within the Unite Alliance.
My pleasure.
Our next episode will focus on barrier-free universities.
I look forward to that.
We hope you'll join us then.
Me too.